Welcome back again to the Sideline Conversations. My name is Attorney Marlon Hill. I'm coming to you live from Miami, Florida, one of the 16 host cities. Sometimes they call me Clutch, and I'm here joined with my fellow friends from the sideline, my good friend from Mexico City, JC Partida from EC Rubio. Thank you for tuning in here on the sidelines. And coming from the north, across the border, my good Maple friend, Aarij Wasti from Gowling WLG, tuning in here on the sideline. We have a very special guest. I'm not sure if he's in Rio or if he's in Sao Paulo or if he's in Salvador Bahia, but I do know that he's coming to us live from the new international offices of the Confederação de Brasileiro. Bruno Costa, thank you for joining us here on the sideline and giving us a perspective of CBF.
Hello, Marlon. Hello, Aarij and Juan. It's a pleasure to be here talking a little bit about, the upcoming World Cup. You guys know that soccer, in Brazil, it's a religion. It's not a sport. For us, it's every 4 years. Everything changes in Brazil. People are painting the streets. People are, more than 200 million, people we have living in the country. So they're all expecting, of course, there is always lot of pressure for Brazil, being the only country that have participated in every World Cup since 1930. The only country to have won, five World Cup titles. But yeah, we know used to this kind of pressure, and that makes, work even harder, year after year.
Well, listen, we're great to have you. It's the spectacle of the World Cup, the largest sporting event in the world. We're expecting to kick off this summer of football this month, and we're so passionate and excited about this opportunity to speak with you. We've been, Bruno, talking about a number of issues, including, marketing issues, sponsorships, immigration, all types of issues, legal and business issues in and around the World Cup. Today, as the World Cup is going to be starting in Mexico City with Mexico playing South Africa, we also have to talk about getting ready for the unexpected things that could happen. So we're going to be talking about that here on this program, but we certainly also want to talk about just the tournament as a whole. We all have our favorite teams. We all have our favorite host cities. Um, Breaking news, Vancouver was selected as the favorite host city. And I don't know what kind of poll that was, Art, but how do you feel about that, Art?
Hey, look, my kids and wife brought that to my attention, and I asked them, like, what are you wowed by? And then they showed me this iconic image of the Science Center being turned into a World Cup Trianda ball, with the sea on one side, with the mountains in the other, and the lights of the city turned on. I think it's just, they have taken host city dressing to a real other level, unlike some cities closer to me. And it's impressive. So I think with the natural backdrop and with this whole city dressing, visitors, teams that are traveling to Vancouver for the World Cup, I think they're going to be wowed. It's going to be amazing.
Well, listen, 16 host cities, three in Mexico, two in Canada, 11 in the United States. Bruno, CBFA, you are going to be, your base camp is going to be in the Northeast. You're going to be getting ready for the tournament there. Give us a little insight as to how the Federation has been preparing for this tournament. You have a new technical director, and he brings his team. But bring us into the room of the CBFA executive and how you've been preparing for the unexpected for this tournament in 2026.
Of course, we have a very experienced group of Carlo Ancelotti, who is a head coach. He already been in other World Cup, representing Italy back in '94. He was the assistant coach for Arrigo Sacchi when Italy played Brazil in the final. So as a former player and a former winner coach, he knows what it takes, to go to the next level. We have 91 people, 26 players plus, the staff, so 91 people in our delegation, security, physiotherapists, cooker, uh, kids, marketing, media. So there is a huge, huge, group of people behind the scene working, so everything can run smoothly. we are staying in New Jersey, training at the brand new New York Red Bull training facilities, which is considered one of the best, training facilities in the U.S. and all over the world. It's a brand new. We're the first. We're using first then the Red Bull, because was just, they just inaugurated like in May for us. We also have a private hotel, 15 minutes from the training facilities. We are keeping very close. It's a private hotel. Nobody can get in, nobody can get out. Only the players. It's 176 rooms. So with all the all that we needed to be focused on the competitions. And I believe Brazil and two more, two other national teams are the only ones. They're paying more to stay in the same place until the end of the competitions. Because like FIFA, you have to keep moving, stage after stage to different place.
Right.
If you don't want to, pay for that, but the CBF is making a huge investment to give you all this security, to give you all this, foundation, and calmness for the players and the staff to work quietly, and have a good workout.
Yeah. So, Aarij, you served as general counsel to the hosting of the World Cup in 2022 in Qatar. How does a three nations and 16 host cities prepare for crises and expecting the unexpected? What are some of the things that go into behind the scenes in preparing for the unexpected?
Well, that's a great question, Marlon, right? Preparing for the unexpected. Look, the reality is with a tournament like this, you can leave nothing to chance. And so, um, really, there is no such notion of facing the unexpected. So, what does that mean, right? Let's set aside the fact that there are three co hosts here for a second. In any host city or host country, there has to be a coming together of the stakeholders. So in this case, you've got FIFA as the event owner organizer. You've got the local hosting committee or the LOC. Depending on the venues that you're dealing with, you have the stadium authority, and then you have the local authorities, police, EMS, fire, emergency response, etc., and of course local government. Now, what do they do, right? So number one is tabletop exercises. So these are really well-designed crises drills, in this case around World Cup venues, that need to be realistic. These multi-agencies need to come together and focus on decision-focused decision making, right? So you start with those tabletop exercises, walk through plausible match day scenarios, and the key is not just asking what would we do. It's about asking who decides, who communicates, who records the decision, and how quickly can we act together. So that's one piece. Then you've got the multi-agency coordination, right? So scenarios, really in this case, should be about the World Cup. Crowd surges at gates, severe weather, protests near a fan zone, a suspicious package, medical emergency, cyber outages, misinformation spreading online. The drill really should reinforce real-time decisions with incomplete information, because that is what will happen on match day. So you practice that. And then finally, the real-time decision making, right? So these are the drills that need an after-action process. The value is not just running the exercise. It's about updating the plan, assigning responsibility, and testing again. So the good crisis drill then gives everybody muscle memory before the pressure of the event going live. That is within the normal ecosystem. Now, when you've got, in this case, three hosts that are working together, they're also, obviously, depending on the topic or the issue, there needs to be a little bit of a cross-border element to it in terms of cooperation, communication, and really brainstorming through, well, what are some of the issues that could affect us all? I think my mind goes immediately to kind of health issues. Now, that could be a pandemic-like scenario, but also, if you think about, we had a scare recently in the Denmark match with Eriksen's health again. I mean, those are moments that are going to bring all host countries and beyond to a standstill. So some of the coordination around that to avoid panic. Weather systems, we recently had a storm that spread from Mexico all the way to Canada. And obviously that requires a little bit of coordination, and other similar issues. I mean, we're living in an age of great unrest, and while the headlines might say that there are a lot of issues plaguing either the U.S. or Mexico, I mean, the reality is that the world is a village today. So, yeah, look, ultimately, it's all about preparedness, and the reality is you never want to face an issue for the first time once the event is live, just because of the number of eyeballs on it and, quite frankly, the sophistication of some of these challenges. So really, it's about preparedness, planning, and practice.
Absolutely. JC, let me bring you in off the sideline from Mexico City. You know, Mexico City has hosted this beloved tournament for 3 times, and I think Brazil won one of those times in Mexico City. What is different about a World Cup in Mexico from a crisis preparedness standpoint? What are some of the things that are top of mind among the Mexican population and those who are following the game as you approach this tournament and a historic hosting by Mexico again?
Yes, thank you, Marlon. I mean, in the last two, or in the past two World Cups that Mexico organized, there were no issues at all. So, and there were actually no worries by the organizers about any security issues. I think that's pretty recent from the last 3, 4 World Cups. It's something new. But the thing is that the Mexican government, and probably unlike the US host cities, in Mexico, the security issues, the risk issues are being handled by the federal government
Okay.
in coordination with the host cities. So that's pretty good because the Mexican federal government is being on top of everything. It is the National Guard, actually the military, who is coordinating all the security issues in Mexico. They are considering risk factors, which cities are the most risk possibility in Mexico, and it's not necessarily the whole cities, Guadalajara, Monterrey, or Mexico City. They are including now as a big risk also Tijuana, being the campsite for the Iranian soccer team. So they are taking into consideration everything. The federal government has done a lot of exercises, and I think they are doing it well on that front. And
Excellent.
by being the federal government, the coordinator, I think it's good.
Excellent. Bruno, you know, CBFA has definitely added one of its stars in Mexico. But your delegation with Brazil comes with some very high level profile players. You know, how is the federation? Is there a system that you have in place to protect the security of the players and the delegation? And do you have public um, practices or private practices? How is the security that you can share to protect the 5-time champion?
Well, we have we travel with almost 10 private securities from Brazil. That's pretty much, of course, having so many important players, and also a coach who is considered one of the top coaches in the world, like Ancelotti. It's important to have this kind of safeness. On the other side, we also want to keep our connection with our fans very close, because it's very important. And I believe we need to find this kind of balance. If you could see, all the Brazilian players are trying to, whenever they arrive at a hotel or they arrive for the games, or even at the airport, they're being very, very generous, very humble, and also that's something we, as CBF, we be talking a lot to the players. That's why last year, the new management of CBF, since we took over in May of last year, we launched the marketing commercial department launched a campaign called hit the chest, bate no peito in Portuguese. That's to reconnect, the Brazilian fans, with the whole ecosystem, with the players, bring the pride of cheering for the yellow jersey again. And I believe, you're doing this. our call up, the final list call up, last week was like one of the most viewed events in the whole world. More than 500 million people watch it and expected the Brazilian final list. So we made a very big um, showcase out of that. Not many national teams have ever done it, and that shows also the passion and, of course, the interest that the yellow jersey has all over the world.
Yeah. Aarij, you had a question for Bruno?
Yeah, Bruno, look, we all know what the yellow jersey means, not just to fans in Brazil, but also to fans around the world. Um, and with that color comes a lot of expectation. Um, some reasonable, and in some cases unreasonable. Uh, what sort of role does managing that expectation within the team, within the organization, with media, with fans, with global stakeholders? What sort of role does your organization, CBF, play in managing those expectations, and how does managing those expectations work into the overall plan as you come up with a delivery strategy for the World Cup?
Arj, I believe we are the only nation that announced that we're going to keep our coach no matter what happened in the World Cup. We renew Ancelotti contract until 2030. So we are really thinking on the long term. And of course, we had a lot of issues in this last cycle. We had like three different coaches. A lot of things happen, and I believe every time that Brazil goes to a World Cup on this kind of situation, usually we succeed. When you go through a mess in '94, Brazil only qualified the last game against Uruguay in Maracanã, and everybody was asking for Romário. Romário was calm, and Brazil beat Uruguay. In 2002, Filipão was the third coach in the cycle. Brazil also had to win the last game to go to the World Cup. It was a big mess, and Brazil won the World Cup. And the other cycles where we were the best team in South America, undefeated, winning everything. So, and I believe we used to go through those kind of mess. And Brazil is the only country that have won the World Cup in Mexico and also in the U.S. 1970 we won in Mexico, and 1994 we won in the U.S. So, I mean, there is a lot of things. I believe this World Cup are just going to be completely different. We play 8 games. We gotta play through humidity. We gotta play to weather delay. We gotta play to different. It's the end of the season for Europe. Uh, in 2002, when Brazil won, that was the last time that Brazil had more than 6, 7 players playing the Brazilian league. This year, we do have the same amount of players also. Why? The Brazilian leagues, it's in the middle of the season, while the European leagues, it's in the end of the season. So those are little details that makes a huge difference when you have to win a game on overtime, when you have to win a game on penalty kick, when you need to travel. In 2022 in Qatar, I mean, it was easy for everyone. Nobody had to travel. It was 1 hour bus drive, to the Forest Stadium. So this year it's gonna be a completely different World Cup. And I also do believe that we do gonna have a surprise like we did in '94, like with Sweden arriving in the semifinal.
Mm.
Bulgaria, Romania had a very good World Cup in '94 also with Haji, and I believe we're gonna have a surprise coming up in the round, in the semifinals, and it's part of the game. We are living in a global world where you see nations that were not like even France. Man, if you see France in the '70s, France was nothing. And suddenly they start changing in the '80, '86. They had a good World Cup with Platini, and after, of course, in the '90s and in the 2000s, that's when France became the powerhouse they are now. So
Well, but one follow-up question there, Bruno. You refer to weather delays, and we know about these regulations in Canada and the U.S. JC confirm, probably similar in Mexico. Whenever there are lightning storms, those matches need to come to a standstill, suspension, delays, what have you, on the field of play. That's quite different to what we've seen in previous tournaments. So how does a team work that element into their training and their planning in terms of, keeping the team on the day motivated and warm?
Archie, the good thing is we had three Brazilian clubs playing at the 2025 FIFA Clubs World Cup. Fluminense, Flamengo, Botafogo, Palmeiras, four clubs, you know. And of course, we were all here watching. Some of the games, they were delayed by 1 hour, 2 hours. And of course, if you're up in the game 1-0, 2-0, and you have to wait 2 hours and an hour and a half to play, that's kind of tough, right? It changes. It's a brand new game, and mainly on the East Coast. We know that most of the weather delay happens on the East Coast. Doesn't happen too much on the West Coast. And we're going to play all of our three games, first games in New York, Philadelphia, and Miami. And I live in Miami, our office is here, so we know how Miami is, in June and July. We have to expect for everything. And that's also going to affect traveling, going to affect preparation for the following game, for the following day, players recovering, all of those details going to make a huge difference. That's why, of course, FIFA's, and I believe that's the only good thing that happened in the pandemic was to improve to 5 subs, the game. And I believe that was very, very useful for everyone. Also, FIFA, now let every nation to bring 26 players. That's also a good thing, so you can have more chance to rotate the roster also. And I believe the nation who has the best balance, and World Cup, it's not how you start, it's how you finish it.
Mm.
A lot of
Absolutely. Well, Bruno, I must tell you that I played in a street soccer tournament this past weekend in Miami. And I'm not going to be called up for any team anytime soon. But I'm telling you, the heat, it was brutal. And so those hydration breaks are definitely going to make a difference. But JC, let's jump in here, in this global world of the digital world and messaging, and the news flies at a minute. Any concerns or questions that you have for Bruno about managing messaging on the online presence and responding to any negative rhetoric that may be out there, and is it different in Mexico?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like, again, it's a new world. I mean, this is very recent. Every news outlet is not taking a day to get the news to the people. Now it's all immediate. And are there, Bruno? Are there any plans by the federation to respond to any messages that may hurt the players or the team at any point in time? I don't know if there's any plans or any strategy by the Brazilian Federation to counter those messages or those news that may impact adversely the team.
We already been dealing, of course, as I said, football in Brazil, it's a religion, and we know how the Brazilian press is, and of course, another thing that has been happening a lot all over the world, it's part of the, politically, there's no way to disconnect politics with football and with sports in general. We also need to balance a lot on this political side. Well, we are the federation that represented more than 200 million people, no matter what color of your skin, no matter what public party you vote for. So we are representing a passion. So we need to be very focused on the message we are sending to our fans, to the press, and of course with social media nowadays, it's important for us also to let the players, understand. Everybody's looking at them, so everything they post, it's gonna be, people can take in a different way. Neymar call was something that moved the whole nation. There was a big discussion, about Neymar coming or not for the World Cup, but he's a very humble person. It's his fourth World Cup, and people need to understand that besides a player, there is a human being there is very respected not only by the players but also outside the country, right? And he's someone that makes players around him better. So that's another noise that the federation on Ancelotti had to manage it before. But as I said, Ancelotti, um, we say in Brazil, he has a, large back, to hold all those criticisms, and of course, being very focused on which direction he want to go,
Right.
not only on this World Cup, but also looking for the next, the next cycle. That's why players like Hendrick, Ryan, 19 years old, 20 years old, came now to start building, because Brazil is going through, it's a transition from Neymar's generation that is leaving after the World Cup,
Mm.
the new generation of Stevan, who unfortunately got hurt. Stevan, Ryan, Hendrick, and many others who are coming in the pipeline.
Yeah. We live in a global world, and you talked about, Bruno, the separation or the connection between politics and football. We know that with this historic World Cup, politics and football are inextricably intertwined. Aarij, what are you seeing from the Canadian standpoint? How do we preserve our constitutional rights while enjoying this beautiful game of football, in terms of unexpected protests potentially over ticket pricing, or protests over access to the game, or protests over...
Yeah, look, there are, Marlon, constitutional protections in any democracy, right? And Canada prides itself in having a very unique structure that stands on, principles of justice. So there needs to be a little bit of a balance here, right? On the one hand, you obviously want to protect those rights. So Canadian venues, Canadian authorities are going to want to approach this as, yes, you've got the right to protest, and therefore plan through two lenses at the same time: the right of protection and public safety. So peaceful protest is really, like I said, it's a constitutional right. The objective is not to eliminate protests around an event. The objective is to accommodate lawful expression in a way that does not compromise safety or access, emergency responses, or the integrity of the matches. I mean, that's why we're there. So what do? You designate protest zones, visible, accessible, but safe, separated from the gates, emergency lanes, VIP movements, transit choke points, and fan zone entrances. Obviously, coordinate with the police. The best approach is liaisoning or communicating first. So engaging with the protest organizers where possible and communicating those expectations clearly. And then finally, very Canadian, de-escalation strategies need to be put in place, right? So the idea is not to ramp this up and have crazy pictures on the TV that evening. It's really about, de-escalation tactics that are professional. You reserve enforcement for situations where safety or lawful access is genuinely at risk, but the idea is not to arrest everybody that's there or, kind of take draconian measures. But just kind of a follow-up to an earlier comment, Marlon, if I may, for Bruno. Bruno, you talked about Neymar and just kind of what, his presence as a senior member of the team now, it's his last World Cup, brings to the team. Just a short story from 2022. So the Brazilian team, as you know, was staying at the Westin Hotel. And I went to visit the hotel the day before. Staff was quite nervous, a lot of expectation. Look, Brazil is the World Cup in many parts of the world. They're staying at our hotel. There's going to be a lot of pressure. This is going to be crazy. And then I went back a couple of days after the team sadly bowed out against Croatia. And the staff said that they were floored by the way the Brazilian team exited the premises. And that was Neymar asked for everybody, all of the staff at the hotel, from chambermaids to reception staff to security to kitchen staff, to gather. And he effectively said, hey, look, whatever success we were able to achieve at this tournament was really thanks in no small part to your work. and we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And you know, we've enjoyed every minute of this stay in Qatar, and you know, from all of us to you, thank you. And a number of staff said that kind of brought tears to their eyes. Brazil, despite the disappointment of losing, and despite not going as far as they normally would, they left a mark on the tournament, and they left a very positive mark on the tournament. Goes to show the professional of the organization, Bruno, where you are. I think the culture of the team, the pedigree, the professionalism, but the leadership. That kind of starts from the top and is really championed by the senior members of the team. And I think, from a fan perspective, that is something that holds this team in good standing as we now come into the 2026 cycle. But I just thought I'd share that it's not always that you have positive headlines and you have positive stories about teams, their behavior, etc. But I tell you that comment and that experience from 2022 is something that to this day stands out for me.
Aarij,
Yeah.
it's the last World Cup for Messi, Neymar, and Ronaldo. I mean, we're never gonna see those three players in a World Cup again. It's well, people most of the times they don't realize, what's going on now. The first World Cup that Messi played, and Ronaldo was in 2006 in Germany, right? Modric also played the 2006 World Cup. The only thing is he lost. Croatia didn't qualify to South Africa in 2010. That's why he's going to his fifth World Cup instead of his sixth World Cup, like Messi and Ronaldo are doing. And Ochoa is the other one, and Ochoa from Mexico. So, and Neymar, it's going to his fourth World Cup. Because there was a lot of criticism in Brazil in 2010 that Dunga take Neymar. He was 18 years old back then, but it's part of the game. But I believe what you said about Neymar, he's an amazing kid. I had the pleasure to work with him in the youth national teams when he was 14 years old, 15 years old, and he's always been different. Technically, we could see he was going to be a top player, of course. But the most important is one thing that I learned early in life is when you build a better person, when you develop a better person, you're going to be develop a better player. And that's something we've been working a lot to do in Brazil. Because in Brazil, we are on a certain point, we are a third world country where we have a lot of poor people, and 99% of those players they come from poor families, where the only way for them to become successful in life is through football, right? And also should take their family out of the favelas, should take their families out of the ghetto, and imagine at 10, 11 years old, 12 years old, being, a kid, a child, and already being the person responsible to bring food to the table for family. That's what happened in Brazil. And that's why, Arj, I'm going to give you another number that in the last World Cup, out of the 11 starting players from Brazil, 6 of those players, they grew up without a dad. So there is a lot of the social part that people don't realize. Most of the people, they think players are human machines where you just take the joystick and say go, score goals and everything. So that's why we've been working now in the new management of CBF. We've been working a lot to develop better coaches, better, people like the whole players in the whole ecosystem, to make Brazil, federation, the national team sustainable. It's
Yeah.
not win inside the field, but working outside the field. And naturally, when we do a good work outside the field, it's going to reflect it inside the field.
Right. Bruno, I really enjoyed my last World Cup was in Brazil in 2014. I had the pleasure of going to about 3 games in Salvador Bahia. What message do you have to the American people, the Canadian people, Mexico about hosting a World Cup? What it means, what should they expect, and what should they be doing individually or community organizations to take advantage of this moment?
As I said, Marlon, you can see behind me, we are very fortunate to be the only country that has the Queen and the King You know, we have Martha as a queen, and of course, Pelé as our king. You know, and also having the Women's World Cup for the first time in Brazil next year. That's bring together also the whole nation. You know, the women's football. That's another reason why we open up the office in Miami, because the biggest market, the biggest women's market, it's US. And
Mm.
of course, Mexico and Canada, they also do have a very good women's, development, and that's also part of our strategy. We played on Saturday in São Paulo for 35,000 people. Brazil played the US. Brazil beat the US 2-1. And we're going to play tonight with more than 45,000 people against the Fortaleza, you know. And I don't know if you saw the head coach from the US. She said she never saw such an amazing environment for a women's game like she saw in Brazil on Saturday. So what I say is, no matter what happened, we know we cannot control the world. Control the controllable. That's another thing that I learned. Enjoy the moment, make relationship, networking, good business, good relations, and also good moments come from the World Cup. And we do know we live in a world with a lot of noise, a lot of things happen outside our control. So let's focus on what we can control, and of course enjoy this moment with our family, with our lovers, with our community, because and those moments are just unique, right? And my friend Marlon, we're gonna be together in Philadelphia watching Brazil and Haiti. So
Yes, I'll be there. I'll be there. I'll be there live. JC, you wanted to ask something? Go ahead.
No, 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 no. I'm fine. I'm fine. I was just
Yeah,
laughing
yeah.
at that argument.
Oh, you're still marinating on the lovers part. Listen,
Yeah,
man, this is
yeah,
football.
yeah.
There's love all around. JC, take us in behind the scenes, the host committees, the war room. Is there a central war room hub where all these potential unexpected issues are triaged? What typically happens, Aarij?
Yeah, no, look, the International Olympic Committee, the IOC for the Olympic Games, has a very interesting model where they co-locate all key decision makers into, one location, one tournament headquarter. FIFA for the first time in 2022 tried that out, and obviously it was a little bit easier to do in Qatar being, a smaller host country with all of the venues sort of co-located in a 1 hour radius. But it worked really well, right? So the idea there is, look, for all functional areas, all key decision makers, let's have them in one location so that people can come together and take decisions on the spot without having to look for people, without having to, commute to a location, or, in some cases, not being reachable by phone, Skype, Zoom, whatever. Can't believe I said Skype. Dated myself a little bit. But, and in Qatar that worked really, really well. I think here might be a little bit more complicated, but I suspect what's going to happen, and this is my understanding, is that there is going to be kind of that key decision-making location in Miami, and then there's decentralization, obviously, around venues at the other 15 host cities, plus, the same way we're communicating over this platform. The reality is that they're employing similar technology so that during meetings and at all relevant times, teams outside of Miami are in touch with the central HQ. The reason for that? Very simple. You want decision making done without delays, because time is not just money. Time is the essence of this tournament, right? There's a kickoff time. You got to match day 3. Everything needs to be done at the same time. The reality is that the tournament doesn't really allow for delays in decision making. And look, there are going to be some issues that are not as time critical, but if you are going to kind of the upper echelons of the decision making hierarchy, chances are it's not something that can be handled at a local or venue level. And so the more efficient that you can make that process, I think it lowers the temperature, it reduces the stress outside of that bubble, and it allows those that are tasked with operationally delivering the event to go ahead and do that without sort of fretting or worrying about have I missed something? Is there something that I should have done? Am I okay? Am I sure everybody at the HQ is going to be okay with this? You let them get on with what they're good at doing, and you take those decisions centrally. So that's kind of what's happening behind the scenes. Every morning there's going to be 8:30 or 9 a.m. meetings where you kind of open up the list from the day before, overnight. Are there any issues that are happening, for example, in the U.S. around immigration? Any lessons learned, anything that we can apply, then they're going to go over by video link to the venues that are hosting that day, do a quick check in terms of everything okay at the venue. Is there anything we need to know locally? What's the weather report, et cetera, et cetera. And, once that is all taken into consideration, then, you're good to go. So that's a little bit of a sense of what's going on behind the scenes.
JC, we had a little scare with security risk in Mexico. You want to give us an update on that, and how is Mexico dealing with any issues related to any other risk issues of insurance and crowd control in that regard in Mexico? How is that usually managed in Mexico?
Well, again, it's usually the good thing is that the federal government is always involved, and these even if it's 3 different venues that we are having games at, the federal government is taking control over that. There are certainly places where there may be more risks. But again, the coordination between federal government and the local governments is being such that everyone is being pretty comfortable in the safety of the games and the tournament in Mexico. I think the most problematic considerations right now for Thursday is not security issues, but demonstrations by certain workers' unions and certain associations that are making or doing demonstrations in Mexico City, threatening to be near the Mexico City Stadium. But that is being handled by the federal government. I think the message is the federal government is doing and the local government is doing everything so all the fans can come to the stadium without any problems. It's more the mobility issues right now than any security concerns. So I think the federal government has done a right job at coordinating all the security issues.
Awesome. Aarij, we have a few more minutes here on the sideline. I want you to kind of just really top us off. What are some of the key takeaways in terms of preparing for this summer of football, summer of soccer, and making sure that we're safe and secure and enjoying the best moments and memories of this game from a crisis management, security management, messaging management? What do you want the fans and the stakeholders to remember?
Look, I mean, Marlon, this is all about enjoying the experience in a safe way, right? So, really, from a fan perspective, the most obvious thing to do, the easiest thing to do, is stay informed and follow the rules. Don't go based on rumors. Don't panic if you hear something that's not verified. Don't panic ever. But really, FIFA has an app. The cities will have apps. There'll be official lines of channels of communication, right? Just stay abreast of those in the lead up to match day, on match day, during an event, after the event, as you get home. And I tell you, one of the amazing lessons that I learned through the 22 cycle was that really fans as a stakeholder group are a big part of making sure that the event runs smoothly. Unlike club football in certain parts of the world, be it in Europe or South America, fans at World Cups see themselves as ambassadors of their nations. And so the behavior of fans is atypical of what some who haven't experienced World Cups in the past would expect. If you've got access to good information, you follow the rules, it's going to be a smooth experience. It's also going to make it easier for the organizers. As far as the teams are concerned, well, that one's easy, right? FIFA, as a priority, for obvious reasons, puts teams and team services first. And so I think teams traditionally have had very little to worry about. FIFA does the heavy lifting and does the worrying and the problem solving for the teams. Other major stakeholders, broadcast, hospitality partners, commercial partners. Again, crises aside, shouldn't be a lot to worry about because again, they've done this before. There's an entire army, an ecosystem behind the operations, and like we mentioned before, you're not going to have a lot of surprises, hopefully. So really, I think again, for fans, it's about enjoying the experience. Just do that in a fun but safe way. Make memories in a tournament like this where it's hot. Obviously, stay hydrated. FIFA has now announced. My good friend Jaimo has personally sent out a video message saying that you can't bring in kind of Stanley mugs or anything of that nature, but you can bring a plastic water bottle so that people can stay hydrated as they move towards venues. And look, host cities and host countries, I wouldn't call it advice, but I think it's, obviously take the tournament seriously. It's not like anything anyone in these countries has seen before, perhaps Mexico being the exception. But use this as an opportunity to showcase what the countries have to offer, right? There's an opportunity at the bid stage. There's an opportunity now. Showcase the best your cities have to offer. Showcase your culture. Give people a reason to return. Be proud of what you're presenting. And I think make the experience positive for all stakeholder groups so that you achieve the ultimate reasons that you host these tournaments, which is increased business, increased visitor revenue, increased visibility on a global stage, the way Vancouver's done that. I think fantastic opportunity.
Bruno Costa, director of the International Offices and International Relations, we're going to have you have the final kick in the final third, Bruno. What's your expectation of success for CBFA for this 2026 World Cup? What are you hoping for?
Of course, winning, there is a lot of expectation for winning, but we have 48 nations, fighting for the same dream. And I think the most important thing is to go as far as we can. Of course, if you can win, it would be amazing, it would be fantastic. But show a group of players that care, and that care for the jersey they're wearing. They represent Brazil in the best way as possible. They represent our culture. They represent our fans. They represent our foundation and our history. And of course, we know that most of the times it's about cycles. And if we don't win the World Cup, that we at least build a good pathway, a good foundation going forward, for the upcoming World Cup. So, and I believe that's the mentality. But we're giving, the federation is making, as I said, a very good investments. Given the President Summit is giving all the resource, that was asked by the staff, so the players could have the best, they cannot complain about anything, and I think Ancelotti already said that, he never saw such organized environment for the players, quiet, calm, and I believe we are really in a good, in a good way to do a good World Cup, and I said it's not how we start, it's how you end it. So fans, if things doesn't happen at the beginning, when you qualify to the next round, it's a brand new tournament. It's a new World Cup, round of 32 now. Before was round of 16. Now it's a round of 32. So once you qualify after the 3 first games, you have 5 more games to win the World Cup.
Bruno, honestly, you should have been a diplomat. The way you handled that was incredible. But that was a really unfair question, Marlon. What's he supposed to say? Obviously, if you're going to ask somebody from CBF, hey guys, what's your expectation? What do you want to achieve in this tournament? Not too many answers he can give. But let me, Bruno, if I can, let me ask you in some ways an easier question. And again, noting that you're a diplomat, you'll be able to handle this one. Could you name maybe 2 or 3 of those dark horses? You talked about, the Swedens of the past, the Moroccos of 22, teams in the past that have really upended tournaments. Who do you see kind of coming through the 2026 cycle through these 104 matches that might get the attention that people may not expect today?
I think in Japan, Norway, on a certain point, Japan it's a country in Brazil can face them, but Norway, I think because of Holland and of course, they have a good foundation. And I don't know, I don't know if Morocco would be a surprise because they reached the semifinal of the last World Cup, but I believe Morocco also, they might come strong also for this World Cup.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Bruno Costa, Director of International Office and Internal Relations. Muito obrigado.
yeah,
Thank you for joining us here on our pre-kickoff episode of Sideline Conversations. My good brothers and friends, JC Partida from EC Rubio in La Ciudad de Mexico, and Aarij Wasti from the north in Toronto, our friends at Gowling WLG. Thank you for joining us here on the program. Make sure that you give us a like, drop us a comment. We look forward to joining you later on in the tournament in July. Stay hydrated, stay passionate, and for the love of football. And we will see you on our next episode. Thank you for joining us here on the Sideline Conversations.
thank you.
Bye bye.
Beautiful, guys. Thank you so much. Obrigado. Nice to meet everyone, and we'll talk to you soon. Enjoy the tournament.